Thank you very much, Sabri. And again, our thanks to Ponts for sponsoring the second in our Millennial webinar series. The last one we had when we kicked off last month was around Millennials, the good, the bad, and the future. But today we transition to our second webinar, I Don't Understand You, 5 Tips for Avoiding Millennial Clashes and Errors. So I'm Paul Thurman. I'm a professor of management and analytics here in New York City at Columbia University and a proud graduate of the Ponts Executive DBA program. It's a pleasure to be with you. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. No matter where you join us from around the world, we're delighted to have you, and we welcome you to our second webinar in the series. Let me introduce our panelists quickly with a quick anecdote. So I just read a very interesting book about the millennial generation, where the author actually takes a bit of a contrarian view. And I'll gladly put the citation in the chat box a little bit later. But this author points out that there's been so much talk about how millennials are different and how they have different standards and different wants from, say, the boomer generation, of which I am kind of. I'm on the cusp of being a boomer, but I was certainly raised as one since my parents were much older. Most people my age, I'm in my mid-50s, most people my age have a grandfather who might have served in World War II, but I actually had a father who served in World War II. So I was very much raised like a boomer. And this author points out that actually the millennials are very, very similar to boomers in the sense that many of our desires are the same. So boomers sort of wanted a good job with good benefits, with training and opportunities to advance. It turns out millennials want a lot of those same things too. So maybe there's a lot more in common than different. And I think that's why this is a very timely topic today around I Don't Understand You. So our goal is to increase that understanding. And we're going to do that with a little bit of an interactive quiz and some polling with you today. Let me introduce our panelists in terms of the two folks who are experts about this, based not only on their academic research at École de Ponts, but also their practical experience in the industry. If you look at the gentleman with the coat and tie on, we're delighted to have Dr. Șerban Toder. Șerban is joining us from Romania, where he has been a senior partner with large major accounting firms, most recently KPMG, but also does a great deal of work in his community as a leader with the United Way and other organizations in Romania. Dr. Toder, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us today. Thanks for being with us. And you see the young lady joining us from the United Kingdom, Dr. Monisha Bala, I should say, and I have to admit, a cohort mate of mine in the Executive DBA program. So it's great to see Monisha with us again. Dr. Bala joins us. She herself is an entrepreneur. She runs her own travel experience business. She refuses to call it a travel agency, which I guess old people like me call them, because it's more than that. She actually creates experiential memories for people through the vehicle of travel. So not only does she serve the millennial generation as customers, she also employs a great deal of them, as Dr. Toder in his role as a senior partner in a Big Four accounting firm. So with that, we have entrepreneurs, big firm, senior executives with us who have also dedicated their doctoral research to this topic. So with that, Dr. Bala, Dr. Toder, I welcome you with us today to be with us as we continue your webinar series around millennials and with the particular topic, I Don't Understand You. So we'll get to that here in a moment. Just a couple of quick housekeeping tips. Please be generous with your use of the chat box. We love to get your questions and comments. I will do my best to keep track of all of those so that when we get to the question and answer period here shortly, I can bring up some of those questions to our panelists and have them remark. We'll also engage you to give us some of your thoughts as we go through this through polls and other pieces of this webinar. So please don't be shy, jump on the chat box, send us your comments, whether it's a comment or a question. I'll try to work them in to the webinar as best I can as we go forward. With that, I think we should go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with a poll, and I'll ask Șerban to comment on this one as we do it. But Sabri is going to put up a slide, and I'll read it quickly, but I'll ask you to actually make a selection. We'll actually poll you on this. So here, the question that's asked on the slide, when asked whether their interests and company's purpose are aligned, and let me just move the poll here out of the way so I can read. When asked whether their interests and company's purpose are aligned, millennials answered the following, and you need to pick one of these. A, yes, they're aligned. I love having a career in this organization. B, no, I always prioritize the organization versus my personal interests or over my personal interests. C, sometimes my personal and social life actually take priority. Or D, it depends. What do you mean by purpose? We'll ask you to please mark your answer here in the next 29 seconds or so as we finish up a minute of polling. So far, we've got a pretty good lead here on one of them, but we'll obviously share the answers with you. We've got about half of you answering so far. Please jump in and pick one. We've got 12 of 25. Let's try to get that up to at least 20. Come on, press a button. When asked whether their interests and company's purpose are aligned, millennials answer the following: yes, no, sometimes, or it depends. What are you thinking? We'll let this go for a few more seconds, Sabri, if you don't mind. 17, come on, 3 more, jump in. 18, we'd like to get your feedback here and see what you're thinking. We got a pretty close tie here for a couple of them. All right. We'll close out here in another 5 seconds, and we'll show you the answer here. Go ahead, Sabri, and show the results if you like. So take a look at these results. So when asked whether their interests and company's purpose are aligned, millennials will answer the following. We're curious what you think. Do you think that they'll say, yes, my interests and the company's interests are aligned. I love having a career in this organization. That got about 1/3 of the votes here. No, I always prioritize the organization versus my personal interests. So that's the least common selection here. The winning choice is the third one, which I think was up as high as 50% at one point in the early polling. People said sometimes my personal and social life take priority. And then fourth, it depends. What do you mean by purpose? Not a lot of takers on that one. But we're going to ask our panelist, Dr. Toder, comment on this, Shervan. So when we ask these millennials what their interests are and whether those interests and companies' purpose are aligned, notice that I believe the correct answer that was shown there on the slide was answer D, it depends, which actually was only 3rd place in our voting. Why are we not getting it here? What is it that we don't understand? If the whole point of this webinar is to understand what we don't understand. Go ahead.
Paul, I wanted to get the first response, and our audience, I think, chose the 3rd response. But the response that I actually got from a millennial colleague about 4 years ago was D, which was basically, I don't understand what you are talking about. And what I learned from her is that if you want this high maintenance generation to be on your side as a manager or as a leader of an organization, you do it in one-on-one meetings with them. And just to put a little bit of context and back to the story, just a few days before I got this answer, I opened a big town hall annual meeting in a large hotel conference facility with a few hundred employees coming from all over the country. And I remember doing a pretty decent job of speaking about the purpose and the future of the organization. I knew very well that organizational purpose is very important for employees, and especially for the millennials employees, which are also called the purpose generations. There is academic research which shows that the employees consider purpose twice as important as a motivator, as an employee engagement, than surprise, for instance, remuneration. So if I did a pretty credible job in that meeting, and if purpose is important for millennials, why was the response the one that I've got? And here, after a reflection, I arrived at the following conclusion. Remember what we have discussed last time in the previous webinars. For the millennials, everything has to be individually tailored, meaning that a town hall meeting, even if it is a successful one or necessary, it's never sufficient, and is not sufficient not only because during those meetings, the majority of the time, the majority of the people think completely about something else, about what is being discussed there, but because millennials want to be individually addressed, one millennial at the time, and everything has to be tailored to them. So what actually happened is that in this one-on-one meeting, you can explain it much better to them, because they won't just buy something which is generic or vague or not necessarily applicable to them. That, of course, means a much more effort from the leader or from the manager. They will have to spend much more time than doing just town hall meetings. But there is also a very good news, and the good news is that if you put the effort, and if they buy it, if they get it, then they will go the extra mile for you. There will be better employee engagement. And in this process, you as the managers will also benefit personally, because first of all, you learn a lot from the millennials, but also because your personal relationship, direct relationship with many individual millennials will get so much better than before.
Thank you, Dr. Toder. And I just want to note we've got a good conversation going on, which aligns with some of the things you were just saying in the chat box. Someone asked, are people being truthful when they answer this question? Meaning, millennial might say one thing in a job interview to sort of get the job versus what they really feel. And Dr. Bala just pointed out something very important. This is not only known as a purpose generation, but also a very authentic generation, meaning they actually aren't afraid at all to say, no, I don't think your purpose aligns with mine. I'll tell you when I think they're not congruent. So Suresh, we thank you for that question. And I know we're going to come back to that topic later on. Sort of, is there a difference between what you see versus how you feel in this generation? And we'll get back to that.
Paul,
okay.
After I gave that speech, I secretly thought that everybody was inspired and fascinated by my speech. And clearly it was not the case. And just a few days later, at least one millennial, I was curious to see what she thought about my performance. And she basically responded, I don't really understand what you are talking about. So yes, I agree, they're very authentic, and they will tell you, in your face.
Right. No, I like to think that a lot of my speeches are meaningful, but then people tell me otherwise. So no, I get it. Good point. Okay. A reasonable job. We got close. We picked C on the last one when the answer was D. So we're getting close to the right answer. Let's see how we do on our next poll, on our next question. And I'll ask Sabri to bring this one up. So here you have a millennial employee who submits a report to the team. All right, so we're in a team. We have a millennial employee. In this case, she submits a report. Several errors are pointed out to her in a team meeting. How does she respond? A few options here. A, she stays on late to rewrite the report to incorporate that feedback and fix those errors. B, she resigns and writes a scathing online review about the company. C, she complains to her manager and asks for help to complete the report. Or D, her mother calls the manager to complain about the team's conduct. Please enter your answer now. We would like 100% response rate on these, please. So we're roughly halfway there. We just hit the halfway mark. Let's get the other 13 or so of you to answer this question. Millennial employee submits a report to the team. A lot of errors are pointed out to her in the team meeting, in a public team meeting. How does she respond? She stays on late to fix it. She quits and writes a scathing report. She complains to her manager and asks for help. Or she has her mom take care of the problem. Mom's not getting a lot of love in this one, I can tell you. So that's not a popular one. Let's see how we do on this one. We'll give you another 10 seconds. We're 23 of 29. Let's keep that up. Where are the other 6 of you? Hit a key, pick an option, please. Jump in on this. Okay, Sabri, let's show them the results, as well as the correct answer. So the answer that so again, D wins again in this one. She actually has her mother call to complain about the team. By the way, that was the least popular answer. Only 4% of you said that, meaning one person, by the way. One person said that, so congratulations. Your mother loves you. In terms of the responses that the team gave, over half of the respondents here, as you can see, said that she complains to her manager and asks for help to complete the report. Dr. Bala, I got to ask you, why in the world is her mother calling the manager to complain about the conduct, and why are we so off in terms of thinking that she would complain to her manager and ask for help? She seems to have talked to her mother first instead of her boss. Please help us understand that.
Okay, Thanks, Paul. Indeed, this happened in our office a couple of years ago. The mother did call to speak to the manager and complained, explaining that her daughter was very upset, was taking the day off because she did not like the way she was spoken to. Having said that, equally, the rest of the answers are also very common, and they just generally tend to stem from communication. So how do we communicate with our millennial teams? I'm going to share with you 4 tips. So number 1, feelings matter more than facts. The emotional information that you deliver is as important, if not more, than fact and data. And linked with that is how you tell them. So the delivery often counts as equally relevant as the content. So how you tell somebody matters as much as what you're telling them, if not more than. And also, we spoke about this at the last webinar, critique has to be cushioned by positive feedback. So try not to give the millennial any critical feedback on its own. Always accompany it with positive comments as well. Number 2, acknowledgement. Now, there are a number of surveys out there that show that millennials flourish with recognition, and they place it on a par with, if not above, salary. And this is acknowledgement not just for the big stuff. Even minor successes in completing everyday routine tasks have to be acknowledged. This recognition that's given to them is interpreted to mean that the organization cares. And if you can strengthen this acknowledgement by formalizing that recognition into personalized programs and awards, then even better. And it doesn't have to be in a big, expensive or expansive gesture. Even appreciation in the form of thank you, a fully stocked fridge, small birthday gifts, all of these work, and they're all counted as care. Number 3, content. Now, this is a tricky one, and my advice here is just be aware. Be aware that millennials will take umbrage at things that you say without intended offense. And there are enough examples of senior leaders who resign after saying something that appears quite innocuous, but millennials haven't necessarily seen it that way. I'm not saying that you should not state your mind. I'm just saying be aware of how they're going to react. So-called woke topics can also be a minefield. So if you're going to make your opinions known to your team on veganism or Meghan Markle or any other such topic, then be prepared. So ideally stick to content that is inspiring, energizing, and very empathetic. And finally, learning experience. The millennials' career in your company is a learning experience. So they want regular communication on the company goals, on the company vision, on the company strategy. They want to feel included. They want to be a part of something bigger. And as Sherba mentioned earlier, we hear of purpose, and purpose gives them that link to engagement. And how you deliver that learning experience also matters. So training has to be manageably chunked, tech-based, if possible, make it entertaining, and give it a simple structure. And keep that training short and to the point. And where possible, choose the right communication methods as well. The medium should be WhatsApp, Teams chats, SMS, because these are all short and to the point. So just to recap, feelings over fact, acknowledge, 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 watch your content, and make it a learning experience.
Thank you for those 4 key takeaways, Dr. Bala. We've got an interesting comment here in the chat box saying, but the millennials have no issue stating their opinions without everything they expect. I feel from that. Do what I expect to receive, walk the talk. Any thoughts on that? So you talked about those 4 points. Is there sometimes a disconnect in that perception of what you think is important versus what they believe is important, and how do you bridge that gap without over communicating to your point?
The whole point is about you're going to have to be in the driving seat, if you like, and so you're going to have to know or guess what they want. But generally, trying to guess what a millennial is trying to achieve or thinking is fairly straightforward, because it is about this whole energizing, this whole empathy, this understanding, and this acceptance, which are all good things in the long run. But if you then, on the flip side, have to give them something that's not so nice, shall we say, then if you know how to deliver it, then the problem is pretty much solved. It's all about how you do it.
Right, and I think continuing to model that so that it's not just, oh, Friday is Millennial Day, so I'll act like a millennial today, and then
Right.
regress to other behaviors that won't work. Excellent point. I want to compliment you as well, Monisha, for bringing in both veganism and Ms. Markle into your comments. Well done. Okay, let's go on to our third poll. And again, please keep the questions and comments coming in the chat box. I'll try to work those in as I can. But here comes our third poll and third question. We've got 33 people on the webinar now. I'd like to see a good response rate again here, please. So in this example, our third of 4 examples, COVID strikes and the team starts working from home. The millennials could feel one of 4 different ways, and we're curious which way you think they are most likely to feel when they start remote working. So again, COVID strikes and teams start working from home. The millennials, A, love it. This is, after all, what they've been lobbying for, and they thrive in this environment. B, they become increasingly over time more and more demotivated. They miss the office camaraderie and interacting with others in the same physical space. C, they're frustrated because their managers are not within an arm's reach whenever they want. They're not on call for them. Or D, they actually start to underperform. They cannot complete their role without regular support. So again, they love working from home. They like it at first, but they start to become demotivated because they're not with others. They perhaps become frustrated because their managers are not there whenever they need them or want them. Or in perhaps the worst case, in D, they start to underperform and they're unable to complete their jobs without regular support. Complete their job tasks, excuse me. Okay, this response is a little bit more balanced. We've got a couple here in the lead, 25 of 32 already at almost a minute and a half. Let's see if we can get that up to closer to 30. Come on, folks, we got 7 more to go. Pick an option. Let us know what you think. In fact, if some of you will pick an option, we'll maybe break the tie here that we've got between a couple of the results. So do they love it, become demotivated, get frustrated, or actually underperform? Give you 10 more seconds or so to do this. We're at 28. Come on, 2 more. Let's get 2 more in here. Let's get at least 30 people responding to this, if we can. Okay, Sabri, let's go ahead and show them the results here and the correct answer from the slide that you see. We'll show you the poll results here. Here, this one was somewhat close. First of all, more responses across the 4 domains, but again, D seems to be the winner. By the way, if we're taking this test and you're looking to pick a random answer because you're not sure, it looks like D is a pretty good choice in 3 out of 4 questions. But in this case, with a slight margin here, 11 of the 30 or so who responded to this, I think 28 people responded, 11 or about 40% said that these millennials will become increasingly demotivated. They'll miss the camaraderie and interaction with others. Followed somewhat closely by the first one. They actually love it. So, and you can maybe put those 2 together, meaning they love it at first, but then they start to get demotivated over time because they miss the office. However, the answer that the research seems to indicate, and I'll ask Dr. Toder to comment on this one, seems to indicate that they will actually underperform because they don't have regular support. So while these answers are a bit of a continuum, it looks like the end result is underperformance. And maybe that's a direct result of them becoming increasingly demotivated. So let's go back to Dr. Toder and see what he has to say about this based on his research. Sherman, take us through this one. Why are they going to underperform just because?
Paul, they underperform because as employees, millennials want and need to be supported and accommodated. But the way work gets done in most organizations goes against their natural instincts. Even now in the current pandemic context, work cultures in many organizations remain hierarchical, and you still have many managers which practice what it is called in the literature, the line of sight supervision, meaning if I can see you, I can control you. So contrast these 2 conversations. The first one, parent with millennial, and the second one, manager and millennial. The first one, parent to millennial. I'm always here for you. And the second one, manager to millennial, using some line of sight supervision mindset. If I can't see you, you must not be working. Clearly, millennials will perform better in the first context. And that means a more flexible and supportive environment. So what to do to make the millennials more effective in the new context and the remote work, working from home context? And here I have two common sense suggestions. The first one is to help them. For the millennials entering the workforce, the purpose of the job is still the same. It is to learn, to gain experience, but also to position themselves for the next steps in their careers. They will do well in a job where there is somebody who educates them about the organization. Even when they work from home, they still want a job where they feel that there are people around who see a lot of potential in them. And they also learn in a different way than you and me, Paul. Our generation, we learn a lot from trial and error, meaning we learn from mistakes and we celebrate successes. But millennials do not always think that way. They feel that they don't have time for trial and error, and they feel a strong pressure to get it right from the very first time, because they felt this pressure all their life. So if you would be their manager, I think it would be a good idea to spend the time with them as long as necessary to respond to their long list of questions and concerns, which should not only generate less stress in your millennial colleagues, but also this will make them more efficient, and you'll also get what you want, meaning a work well done from the very first try. And second, believe in them. Millennials have been told that they are special with unlimited potential. All their life, they set up goals from school and college. They met the goals, and many times they have exceeded the goals. Now, being in the workplace, they want to prove their worth as well. They are willing to work as hard as they can if they sense that there is somebody there who believes in them and that their hard work will be recognized and appreciated. So to summarize, if you are a manager and work with millennials, be there for them when they need it, for as long as they need it, to help and to encourage them.
Okay, no, good points. And we had some folks echoing some of the things that you said in the chat box. Someone mentioned, Leandro, thanks for your comment. He had a conversation recently with HR saying that they agree that people not willing to come back into the office ever are usually at risk of leaving because they feel very disconnected. And when you're home, you sort of don't know what company you're working for. So you can work for any company. And Suresh points out as well, if they're childlike and want to be a grown-up, then they feel like they need to have a hand to hold. But that's important. Being able to spend that time almost as a corporate parent, not to be trite, but to spend that time and build that connection is important. Otherwise, they won't have any connection, certainly physically, at all. Let's go on to our fourth and sorry, sure, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead and react to that if you like.
I just saw a question in the chat, and I think Monisha will cover it later, but I just wanted to say the following. The more the millennials get experience, the more they mature. And if they go to being the senior millennials, you remember the distinctions I made last time between senior millennials and junior millennials. So the more they move from junior millennials to more senior millennials, the more they are willing and able and open to more critical feedback, and the more valuable it is for them.
Good. Okay. We've got one more poll question to ask you, one more scenario for you to consider. So Sabri, thank you for putting that up now. So here's the fourth and final one. And we're going to ask as many of you as possible to please comment on this. So in this situation, fourth and final one, a millennial team member joins a new medium-sized company. On his second day, he does the following. So again, millennial team member joins the company and he's on day 2 of his new job. So does he on day 2, A, approach the CEO to highlight all the things that are wrong and need to be improved? B, ask his manager about arranging free snacks for the team. C, comes in late because he needed some balance after a really tough and intense first day. Or D, sends his manager an email to emphasize his enthusiasm for his new role. So again, second day on the job, head straight to the CEO with a hit list. B, free snacks. C, coming in late because it was a rough first day or a tough first day, intense first day. Or D, sends his manager some communication maybe not through email to the point made earlier, but send some communication about the enthusiasm that he feels for his new role and his new job. Tell us what you think here. A pretty balanced reaction, I might say, after 1 minute in. 2 or 3 of these choices are just neck and neck here. We've got 22 of you. Let's get a few more. Let's try to get up to close to, if not perfect, response here. So again, CEO, free snacks, coming in late, or expressing enthusiasm. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. And thank you again for the comments in the chat, which I'll try to work in here as we move forward. Okay, Sabri, let's show them what the 24 folks said. Here's the results. So interestingly, now, by the way, I have to commend the audience here, because the easy answer was to go after D, because D's been the right choice in 3 of the in the prior 3 scenarios. But I suspect that you're a very insightful crowd here in terms of knowing that it probably wasn't going to be D on the 4th slide. And indeed, we see agreement here in our 4th and final scenario, where yes, the crowd agrees at roughly 36% that this millennial is going to, on the 2nd day, approach the CEO and talk about all the things that need to be improved. Followed closely, by the way, with options C and D. Comes in late because it needs some balance, or at least sends a manager a note saying, "Hey, I'm pumped to be here." So with that, we're going to ask Dr. Bala to comment on this. Hey, we got this one right, Monisha. The other 3 were a little off, but
having said that,
but this
one of those could have been right.
That's true. Yeah, any one of them could be right, but why this one? Why will this millennial be so bold? And I'll use that as my term, as a not millennial, but be so bold as to hit the CEO on day 2 of the job and talk about all the things that need to be improved. Walk us through.
So many of you who lead millennial teams may recognize this, because these are young people who have lots of self-belief, lots of confidence in their ability. And remember, they've been given a voice from a very young age, and they're going to use this voice in the corporate workplace. Having said that, as I said earlier, any one of those answers could also have happened. So I'm going to give you 4 tips on how to handle this. These revolve around company structure. So number 1, keep it simple. Complexity doesn't work for millennials. In fact, it doesn't work for anybody, but especially for millennials. You need to create accessibility within your companies with flatter corporate hierarchy. Remember, millennials have a lot of convenience in their lives. They've got Deliveroo, they've got Uber, they've got Amazon. And obviously, this translates to the workplace as well. Also, remember, they're not going to stick around for too long. They expect to start doing and contributing from day 1. So if your company, your organization is simple, you're allowing them to start contributing from day 1. So make the most of it. And then finally, they have the confidence and the ability to speak to whoever they wish. So seniority or status does not impress them. It doesn't scare them. So again, get used to it, because, using your word here, Paul, they have bold ideas. It's worth listening to them. Second, fun. Now, millennials look to the business to offer an element of fun and social culture. And many, many companies out there are uneasy about this. They're thinking, well, hang on, I'm paying my employees to do a job. It really is not up to me as a company to run a college campus for them. Very, very valid point, but equally, it's an inexpensive strategy. And many studies have shown that this is effective for millennial buy-in. It works. So as a result, do consider bringing in some elements of fun into your organization. And remember, with fun comes informality. So communication is simple, to the point. Teams are comfortable collaborating with each other. Employees are more confident to speak up, and the organization benefits. Number 3, care culture. Millennials expect trust and care in the organization. And I touched upon this earlier. They're looking upon their managers, their directors, to work as a mentor for them, someone who looks after their professional and personal well-being. And they want that workplace to be safe. They want it to be nurturing. And if you have a wellness program, then even better. I was just reading a couple of days ago a list of the top employers of millennials, and care was a keyword that came up in nearly every single one of them. And finally, flexibility. Companies that offer flexible work hours have been proven to enjoy significantly higher rates of retention. So try thinking about creative flexible timings or a more fluid workday structure. Revisit the holiday system and other types of time off. In our company, we're considering a 4-day working week, looking at paying on outcome rather than hours. And if you can personalize these solutions to every individual, then you've got it nailed. So to recap, make the company simple, make it fun, care about them, and be flexible.
Thank you for great tips. And actually, I'll have you comment on a question that came up in the chat box while we were talking. Kathleen, thank you for this one. Someone asks, these are great insights and great tips, but how are we also redefining the role of management now? How does management get its job done, since a lot of time will now be taken up with this care, if you will, of these millennials? So the question I'll throw back to you, Monisha, is this now another part of a manager's job, or does this become the manager's job at some level? Realizing you won't have an entirely millennial workforce necessarily, but how does that redefine not just the work environment, but also what a manager is?
So I am so glad you raised this. So excellent question, whoever raised this. Managers already spend approximately 30% of time managing their teams. And this is going to go up significantly. And so you're going to have a manager who is probably less involved in running the business to give you an example, maybe I run a travel business. So my role as a manager is going to be less on creating exciting travel experiences, and it's going to focus more on making sure that my millennial team are creating those packages. We're also going to have to revisit how we're going to, this is now going into the whole sort of pandemic and working from home and remote working area. If you're going to have flexible working hours, if you're going to have a team that's working from home or from different remote spaces, you're going to have to look at, again, your management. How are you going to bring them on board? How are you going to communicate that culture of your company? How are you going to make sure they do what they do? How are you going to make sure that you are there for them on tap? So all of these things have to be considered when you're when in this new working space that we're going to quite definitely have. And another two things I want to add is, how are you going to contractually employ people, those working from home and those who are not going to be working from home and are in the office? Where are you as a manager or a director going to be? Are you going to have, you have to try and avoid that two-tier system. And very finally, the role of women. It's very likely that women are the ones who are going to opt, in many cases, especially if they have families, are going to opt for the role from home. So having that distance from the workplace, again, as a manager, as a director, how are you going to work around that? Are they the ones who are going to be overlooked for promotions? So there's a number of things, but I'm glad that there's many, many more, but I'm so glad that this was asked, because it's going to be a huge game changer.
Dr. Toder, do you have anything to add to Monisha's comments?
Yes, I felt tempted also to intervene and to add the following. Employees, including millennials, do not leave organizations. They leave their bosses or managers, especially their immediate bosses. And millennials have very high expectations from their organizations and also on themselves. But the highest expectations they have, it's about their immediate managers. So not the top guys, not the one on top of the pyramid, but the project manager, the team leader, the audit, the in charge, whatever it is called. So there is research which shows that when millennials leave, they leave because they had a bad relationship or not a good relationship with their managers. So what I think organizations should do, or organizations should be encouraged to do, is to prepare their managers, including mid-level and lower-level managers, to work with the millennials, to understand millennials, to understand how they work, their behavior, where they come from, and to have this flexibility in the relationship with the millennials. That's really very, very important, to have a permanent and ongoing conversation, to understand what is in their mind about what and how both of them can do together to work in that organization.
Very well. I think those are excellent insights, especially the one around, which is one people I believe should take seriously. Millennials and people in general, they don't leave jobs, they leave managers, they leave bosses. And that's a very, very good tip for all of us to consider. Also, I'm happy to note that someone on the in the audience mentioned, "Hey, care is nice, but don't spend all your time caring for us. Make sure you give us some challenges too. We want to be challenged, which is terrific. So well done." Virginie, thank you for your question. Yes, we do have recordings of the first webinar, which we've referenced a few times. This one is also being recorded and is live on Facebook. So we'll make sure you know how to get all of those. So you'll be able to review any of this in the future. With that, we're coming near the end of our 45 minutes together, but I want to ask our audience, certainly, if you have any more questions or comments that you'd like to make, we welcome those now because we do have about 5 minutes left for questions and closing. But I'll throw one out there while the folks are typing in the chat box. And Sherban, I'll ask you this one. I'll ask both of you to comment on this briefly. One thing that came up last time and in this session is, are there any local statements or things in terms of best practices? Meaning, we're talking about millennials quite generally and quite globally. In the first webinar, we talked about, are there country-specific differences? And India came up, for example. Let me throw another question in here. Are there sector or company-specific things? So, for example, if my millennial is a technologist or an engineer versus a marketer and business person, do any of your advice points change, or do they need to be customized? And ladies first, Monisha, why don't you take us through?
I'm glad you asked that question. And a lot of people have asked me this. So some industries, by their very nature, seem to be naturally incorporating very millennial friendly techniques. So tech obviously springs to mind. It's very fast moving, it's got constant change, there's cutting edge innovation. But I did some research on a number of different industries. And these also had the more exciting industries, if you like. There was PR, there was design, and there was technology. And they all raised the same millennial debate. So even a sexy tech startup with trendy offices and super cool product is facing the same millennial issue. So I think that the answer lies less in which industry you're in, but more in terms of the size of the company. So big companies are expected to be able to cater to millennial expectations. For example, they can invest in technology solutions for training, they can allocate mentors in-house, they can cover for them when they take their year off sabbaticals, they can give them a lot more promotional opportunities. But these things are not necessarily always possible in a small company who may not have the resources to come up with customized solutions. And that means that, you know, a millennial taken on to do a certain job will be expected to do a lot more, not necessarily what they want. Having said that, smaller companies have a lot to give millennials. So the CEOs, for example, are going to be much more accessible. The bosses work in much closer proximity to their millennial teams. They are exposed to every facet of a millennial's character and requirements. They can identify what really matters. They can give them the flatter hierarchy. The young millennials who join a small team or a medium-sized team have the opportunity to be involved in a range of different roles. They're in positions of learning and responsibility at a much younger age or in a much more junior position. So I believe actually that by their very nature, the SMEs can provide what research shows that millennials want in the workplace.
And I should note, Dr. Bala, you actually own an SME, so and run one. So you are not just speaking from theory; you're speaking from experience. Dr. Toder, give us 30 to 60 seconds on your response around are there sector or industry specific ones? And I'll throw in another one that came in on the chat box. You can answer as well. What happens when a Gen Z manages a millennial? What happens when you have that cross generational thing? If you want to hit on that. One last point. Let me thank Sabri. Sabri's put links in the chat box to the recordings of the prior sessions, as well as the LinkedIn link for the page for this series, so you can catch up on anything that you've missed and look forward to what's coming up, which I'll talk about a bit later. Dr. Toder, please. Gen Z is managing millennials, and is there a difference between working for NASA or a space agency versus a clothing firm when it comes to managing millennials?
I think Monisha got it right earlier. So I'd just like to add the following, because the subject of our webinar is about I don't understand you. Yeah, so this intergenerational misunderstanding. And I just wanted to clarify one big misunderstanding, which is the following. Millennials are ready to change the world from day one when they join the organization. But the problem is that this is not why the organization hire millennials. Organizations do not hire millennials to change the world or to change the organization. And let's be honest about it. They don't hire the millennials to put them on their more interesting and more sophisticated and complex jobs, but because there are some simple tasks, some routine tasks that somebody has to do it, at least at the beginning when they hire them. So then they join the organization with big expectations, because maybe during the recruitment process, they are told that they will join the organization and they will change the world there. So when they come, the first thing that they are asked to do is to make photocopies of big binder of hundreds of invoices. And the big problem with that is that if it takes organizations months or sometimes years in some organization and in some industries to get them up to speed and to put them into meaningful roles in their teams or in their organization, that there is no surprise that the millennials, especially the high potential millennials, will be not motivated and not growing and not engaged. So here I have one suggestion, which I think is good for any type of industry. So if you know that you are not going to put the millennials for your most interesting job, maybe you can, yeah. But if you are in an industry where you cannot do this from the beginning, at least do the following: give them small but interesting and new responsibilities all the time. Commit into teaching them and transferring to them one small task or one responsibility at a time, because in this way, even if they are not changing the world, but they feel that they are growing, they feel that they are learning, that they feel that their potential is getting better in that organization, irrespective of the industry.
Very good advice, and being incremental yet comprehensive is important. And I remember very well those early days of copying and putting things in binders. I had a different approach. I had a different attitude. I thought, wow, they're paying me this money to do this. This is fabulous. I'll do this for a while. And then it got more difficult. But again, thank you both, Dr. Bala, Dr. Toder. We're going to move now to our wrap up. I'll ask each of our distinguished panelists to give us a quick minute wrap up of what we've talked about today. Remember, we've come from millennials, the good, the bad, the future. That was the topic of our first one, to I don't understand you, and some tips on how to work with and manage millennial clashes, which I think we've gotten some good positive examples of how to do that. Dr. Bala, I'll ask you to start a wrap up and tell us what we should take away from today as we go back and work with millennials with whom we may clash, and what's one of the first or second things that we can do to make that pain or that discomfort a little less. Dr. Bala.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to speak from the point of view of small business once again. The concern is often amongst small businesses, but equally any size business, that making our organizations millennial friendly involves vast restructuring at very high cost. And I think it's important to understand that this isn't the case. The solutions don't have to be expensive or involve major restructuring. And that is the beauty of some of the solutions that we've shared with you today. In nearly all cases, it's actually about inviting you to have a mindset change towards this generation. And it's actually management mindset change more than avocado breakfasts and ping pong tables and bouncy castles that will encourage your millennials to find solutions themselves. And those solutions will make things better for themselves and for your organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bala. And Dr. Toder, what are your thoughts? Also, there's a question just came into the Q&A saying, aren't millennials motivated by money more than motivation? We've talked a lot about how it's often at least as equal as salary. In fact, I think one of you commented sometimes that recognition actually pays more dividends than the salary itself. How do we think about these clashes? And again, what are those one or two things that we can do to reduce that friction when we start to see these clashes occur. Dr. Toder.
My message is simple and short. If managers want high performance out of this high maintenance generation, they have to commit to high maintenance management every day. And going back to the previous conversation, whether you like it or not, whether you have to put a lot of effort or not, millennials need their manager to help them grow in their role, to build relationship inside and outside the organization, to form new bonds with their new colleagues and with their managers. So my advice, meet a millennial every day, preferably not the same one, preferably face-to-face, but during these days, it's also okay to meet with them virtually. They will get better. Their manager will also get better. And the organization will also benefit in the process. So really a win-win situation for all the parties involved.
Good. So with that, I'd like to thank Dr. Monisha Bala, Dr. Sherban Toder for helping us work through millennials. I don't understand you. Hopefully, I think we've all gotten some tips to how to create more understanding, more common ground, and therefore more collaboration and more fruitful working relationships, even when we're remote and still working during lockdowns during the pandemic, which again, we wish you and all of your family members and friends the best of health as we continue to fight this pandemic. Continue to do what it takes to stay safe, and we wish you and everyone well. With that, I'd just like to add a few wrap-up comments and a call to action. Last time we asked you to give us an example of something positive that you saw with a millennial or a positive interaction that you had. We're going to ask you to do something similar to that, but with a little bit of a different focus here. Our call to action, and Sabri, I'll ask you to put up our contact information at this point. If you want to reach out to any of us, here are our LinkedIn links, which you can get to us. We encourage you to connect to us so we can continue to network with you, but also use it as a way to be in touch with us and to share with us some of your stories. And you'll see the LinkedIn stuff right after this slide. Other way, there we go. There's the three of us. So that's how you can get to us. This is also posted online. Sabri also put in the chat box the link for this Millennial series, webinar series, so you can see what we've done and what's coming up next, again, with links to the recording. So thank you for that, Sabri. With that, I'd like to give you the following call to action, and we encourage you to share this with us. Obviously, the world has changed quite a bit, changed dramatically in the past year or more. And to help your team and teams that you work with cope with changes, again, whether it's at school, work, even perhaps in your own families, try this. Here's a tip that we heard from both presenters, and we encourage you to try this one. Identify one positive change that you see in millennial behavior. So not a positive interaction like we asked you last time, but think about these clashes and think about these I don't understand you moments. We'd like for you to identify a moment of understanding based on perhaps some of the tips we've heard today. Identify a positive change in millennial behavior that you've noticed recently. Are they seeking more challenges? Are they becoming more independent? Are you seeing differences in the way they are communicating and the way that you are communicating with them? Is your care being received properly? Or are there things that you've done to help improve that care and mentoring with millennials? So again, share those examples of an improvement, a positive change that you've seen in millennial behavior recently. Share those with us on our LinkedIn, share them with us on our webinar series site. We would love to see your thoughts as well as our own in terms of what works for you when you face these I don't understand you moments. With that, again, I'd like to thank Monisha and Sherban. We can take this screen off, Sabri. So in terms of thanking our presenters, Dr. Monisha Bala, thank you for being with us from the UK, and Dr. Sherban Toder, thank you for joining us as well. We welcome the next point in this series, the next webinar in our Millennial Understanding series. I'm happy to announce it will be on Wednesday, May 12th. You'll see all of this posted on LinkedIn and in other social media. Wednesday, May 12th, we're going to talk about millennials and ask a very interesting question. And some of it started to come up today in the questions from the audience. Millennials, have they not improved the workplace, or have they? So we've talked a lot about these clashes. We've talked a lot about the care and nurturing and mentoring that millennials need. Does that mean that they haven't really improved the workplace? Or actually, is this a big improvement? Is this perhaps the sea change that the workplace has needed even remotely? We'll tackle that question and a few more, as well as your comments, when we see you in the third of our Millennial webinar series on Wednesday, May 12th. Please look for announcements on specific timing, invitations, and links to join us. With that, Dr. Bala, Dr. Toder, thank you. Sabri, thank you for your excellent technical support as always. And to the audience, thank you for your participation in our polls, in our chat box, and in our Q&A session. We can't do these without you. We thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again next time in our Millennial web series with Ecole de Pont, Millennials. The good, the bad, the future. I don't understand you, and have you improved the workplace or have you not? That'll be the topic of our third one. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. We look forward to catching up with you in May. See you again, and goodbye.
Thank you,
And good
Monisha.
luck with everything here from New York.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.